All right, welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. First off, let me outline how this show is going to go. First off, I will give you a little bit of an update on some information that we have about the coronavirus. I'm only going to spend a little bit of time going off and talking about the misinformation that the media is trying to do in order to rewrite the history of the coronavirus in order to, position it politically for the 2020 election. Don Lemon on CNN posted an incredibly dishonest and deceptively edited video in his broadcast. Then I'm going to go ahead and talk about, some of the things that the coronavirus has exposed about issues that we have debated here in the United States for well over a decade, and how it has exposed that conservatives were right about a lot of things, right? And then talk a little bit about some of the issues that the left believes that the coronavirus has exposed their beliefs as right, and debunking that. And then we're going to go off and talk a little bit about, some other issues that are going on under the radar, because everybody is focused on the coronavirus, that there are things that we are not paying attention to and we need to. All right. But before I get into all of that, let me go off and highlight two things. One, yes, this is a green screen. No, this isn't a TV screen broadcasting this. And I know if I put a light behind me, it would go through and help with the cut of the green screen, so that you don't notice the little bit of outline. And as I look through here, I now notice that my shirt to you is going to read backwards. So, maybe I'll fix that for a future episode. I just haven't had writing on my shirt before, so I never noticed that. But anyways, if I put a light behind me, for a better cut on the green screen, it will provide too much lighting and I can't color correct it. So the video itself entirely would just look, off. And that's probably because of the camera I'm using is not the most, professional camera. I just bought something that would work for this. Okay. So, as we go through and take a look at everything, I also want to put a shout out to the online community that has really stepped up in many ways, whether they're talking about politics or not talking about politics. And by the way, this would be a great time for conservatives and liberals to do joint broadcasting, where they do online debates, since we suddenly have a lot of time on our hands, a lot of us, being at home. So if we want some of that human interaction, maybe we can go through and facilitate debate, not of politicians, but of us, the average citizens. And maybe we can try and find a way to keep it civil. And that way, maybe after all of this, we can have more togetherness, and all of that, and a more civil tone in our society, because things have been heating up, quite a bit. But for those of you who are not doing politics, you've really stepped up as well. Whether it's you online gamers on Twitch and YouTube going off and stepping up your gameplay for those who like to watch, live stream video games, to people who have now started, doing shows on, creative ways to exercise at home, cooking shows, just regular entertainment, shows, about random stuff, movies and TV shows and, just some interesting stuff, and, all the things being posted, to try and help entertain each other and try and keep some semblance of connection. The internet community has stepped up quite a bit. And while I've been focused on, this show quite a bit, I do know that I need to step up on my other YouTube channels, and other podcasts to be able to pump out more content to help keep you entertained there as well. So I need to do my part outside of politics. Okay, now, with all of that said, let's go ahead and provide some updates here as it comes to the coronavirus. Now, one of the things that has been circulating is the fears about the lack of ICU beds, in intensive care and for, those who have gotten sick. Now, here's the thing. Talking about the ICU beds, the number of ICU beds and all of that, it's not the real point of the situation, because let's say we put out another 100,000 ICU beds. The question is, do we have the medical staff to attend to all those beds? So I hear all this comparison of ICU beds in the United States versus other countries. A lot of that doesn't take into consideration, differences in population. So we got to go off and try and do it on a per capita basis or per 100,000. But if we don't have the medical staff, to tend to those beds, what good would those beds, really be? But the good news is we're actually in far better shape than what has been previously reported. So, taking a look here at the Wall Street Journal, America's intensive care dividend. The article goes on and states, some who favor government-run healthcare are pointing out that the U.S. has fewer hospital beds per capita than other countries. But that's in part because more surgeries are performed at outpatient centers, where patients are less likely to catch infections. A more important metric is the number of intensive care units, which have sophisticated equipment and high staff-to-patient ratio. These are crucial for patients in respiratory distress. A 2012 review in the journal Current Opinion in Critical Care found that the U.S. had 20 to 31.7 ICU beds per 100,000 people, compared to 13.5 in Canada, 7.9 in Japan, and between 3.5 and 7.4 in the UK. Differences in how countries define ICU account for some of the disparity, the article notes, and that the U.S. needs more ICU beds because it has higher incidence of chronic conditions like heart disease. But importantly, the article finds that the health spending is correlated with increasing delivery of critical care. So as we go through and we talk about, the ICU beds and all that, it turns out that as far as, critical care units and all that, a lot of our stuff and surgeries and all that are done as outpatient procedures where you're not actually hospitalized. You show up, they do the surgery, they send you home. Those beds are not being calculated, in all this, and they do have a lot of sophisticated equipment there because they got to keep, depending on, the surgery, they got to, have you knocked out and equipment to keep you breathing while they perform the surgery as well as sedated. So, we do have those beds, but it turns out that actually we do have more beds per 100,000 people than the countries in which the left is holding up as, having better health care and, and showing as a model of single payer being better than the United States. Well, it turns out we're actually in a better position than all of those countries, medically speaking. So, the point of that, is not so much to debunk the left's, fake narratives as it is to try and, educate and try to relieve some of the apprehension, tension, and fear about, oh my God, we don't have enough beds, we're understaffed, turns out our medical system isn't as great. No, actually our medical system is far superior and better ready and able to handle the coronavirus than all those single payer systems. Let's try to take a look at actual facts and analysis and do it based off of research that, was coming out, before the coronavirus hit, and take an actual analytical approach. And let's not just confine our definition of ICU or critical care to just hospitals. We also have to take into consideration all the other medical facilities that surgeries are, performed in as places in which medical treatment can be provided. That said, what we don't know right now is based off of how many people might be infected, because we don't know how many people will be infected and how many people will actually need care. Because as we go through, it's kind of conflicting as far as, okay, you got it, but, you don't need the hospitalization because it's not that bad for you, versus the people that it is bad for. So we don't actually know how many beds we need. But for out of all the other countries, we are in the best shape for that. Okay, but adding all these beds, if we don't have the staff to take care of them, especially if people in the medical field, get sick and they are having to be quarantined and can't, show up to work to take care of other people, so we have to kind of, just calm down and, we're only going to know based off of what actually happens, and, no one can predict the future. Okay, so as the coronavirus has spread globally, there has been different ways in trying to handle the, coronavirus pandemic, and people are trying different models, and the Washington Post had highlighted this where, you got places like the United States that is trying social distancing and self-quarantining and trying to avoid, going out or, seeing other people and avoid any and all activities, and based off of that, it's the idea that we want to, flatten the curve, of course, but also the idea that if we can stop the spread of the infection, then those who are infected will, recover, from it, but the virus itself will die out as it has no place to jump to, no one else to infect because it never gets close to the other people to try and infect them, right? And, hopefully that would eliminate, the spread of this virus and, eliminate it. Of course, doing this may also eliminate the spread of a lot of other viruses, that have, just kind of been circulating for decades, so there may be that, but there are other countries out there that are trying the herd mentality, right? The herd immunity, idea. Now some of you, the best way to explain this is chickenpox, right? What did your parents do when they found out that someone in the community or someone in the town had chickenpox? Well, everyone took their kids and flooded them over to that kid's house so that everyone would get chickenpox at the same time. So, you can just quickly deal with it, get it over with and get it out of the community as quickly as possible. And then after you've had chickenpox, you're immune to it and you won't get it again. So it was that, quickly get everyone through it, get everyone infected quickly so that everyone will recover quickly. Boom. Well, one of the issues that I am concerned about, even as people are trying hybrids between the method, shelter out the old people and, tried the herd immunity with the young people, is with this mash effort here. What happens when, the countries who did quarantine, it worked for them, start international traveling with those who tried the herd immunity? Because, is that just going to recirculate? Or are we just going to take a look at what model worked the best, between the countries? And if the herd immunity worked better, does that delay how long it's going to take for our, economy and society to get back up and running? As we have to switch from quarantine to everyone go out, get infected, and get this over with. Or, for other countries, how are they going to happen if herd immunity was the wrong approach and then they have to go into complete and total quarantine? So trying to figure out how that's all going to play out, is kind of, unknown at this particular point. Now, as we go through and we take a look at, some countries that have really been hit hardest, some, like Italy, that does have a single-payer healthcare, they are now in complete triage mode, where they are stating that, if you're at a certain age or a certain health condition, sorry, we're not gonna, we don't have the capacity to treat you. You're on your own, and so, now that's Italy, and that is an extreme example, but I wonder how many other single-payer healthcares are going to be like Italy, where if they start getting overwhelmed, they start going off and just saying, hey, you're on your own, if you don't, if you're too old or you're not healthy enough, sorry, things suck right now, and so just make the most of whatever time you have left, right? Now, whether or not that would happen here in the United States, with our private healthcare, would that turn out to be the same way? Unlikely, but again, we never know what will happen if our healthcare system gets vastly overwhelmed. But to try and avoid having to even come close to making that decision, this is why we are trying to flatten the curve with social distancing and everything to prevent the overwhelm into the healthcare system, so that we don't have to even contemplate making those choices, right? So that we can avoid having to deal with that. All right. So now we'll go ahead and take a look at, a couple of things that the media is doing. I guess I was getting too hopeful when, a person on CNN, actually, decided they were going to praise Trump. I thought everyone was going to finally get their head out of their politics and, start, actually on the national news, those who claim to be journalists would, abandon the politics and, just stick to the facts. Well, that was too much. Now, luckily, there are still some, very few, who are starting to get their head out of their politics, but not many. Okay. As we go through here and we take a look at this, as reported by Breitbart, there was fake news that was being spread that President Trump sought to get a monopoly on COVID-19 vaccine. So what they were saying here is that Trump was, trying to make a deal with this company that, is in the progress of the vaccine, trying to get them to the United States and have exclusive monopoly on the vaccine so that it would only be for the United States and, not for any other country. Now, this was a sick story that the media tried to push in all of this and did nothing but, was for no other purpose than to cause panic and fear and all of that. Now the company did come out, and made a tweet that stated, to make it clear again on coronavirus, CureVac has not received from the U.S. government or related entities an offer before, during, or since the task force meeting in the White House on March 2nd. CureVac rejects all allegations from the press. So, this was just complete and total fear-mongering and trying to demonize Trump in the middle of a crisis. Come on, we're in the middle of a crisis and you're trying to stir fear and panic by pushing this crap? Are you kidding me? This is, totally disgusting. Completely disgusting. Now, other lies that have come out is that the New York Post, in their article, even during coronavirus crisis, liberal media can't resist spreading lies. On February 28th, Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank tweeted out, "Remember this moment? Trump in South Carolina just called the coronavirus a hoax." The tweet has since been linked more than 162,000 times. Milbank subsequently wrote a column repeating this claim. This is one of those things where a lie will spread around the world before the truth even gets its shoes on. But anyone watching Trump's rally in the Palmetto State that day knows that this wasn't true. Even factcheck.org, which generally leans left, gave it, what was it, 4 Pinocchios, or came out and told that it was a lie. You can read the rest of that and go through and read the article yourself, right? But I'm going to go ahead, because someone's going, well, you're pointing out these articles from right-wing sources claiming to have debunked left-wing sources, or you just play what the media is saying and then you just claim that it's not true. Could you provide a little more evidence? And this is the last bit that I'm doing regarding, the coronavirus as far as the fake news and the disgusting display by the media. So let's go ahead and take a look at, how the media is pushing this hoax that Trump called the coronavirus a hoax.
But this may be one of the most outrageous claims this president made about the virus.
One of my people came up to me and said, Mr. President, they tried to beat you on Russia. That didn't work out too well. They couldn't do it. They tried the impeachment hoax. That was not a perfect conversation. They tried anything. They tried it over and over. And this is their new hoax.
The coronavirus is no hoax.
Okay. Now, did you see how disgusting that was? First off, did you notice that little edit there? That little flash there? Between Trump telling the story of, the person who, said first they tried Russia and all that. And then once it got to the end, there was that little flash. And then, then boom, there's Trump saying it's all a hoax. This is their new hoax. Let me explain something. What CNN did there was, first off, they didn't start it at the beginning of, that conversation. This is where they get into the deceptive editing. And I got the full clip, going on here that I'll be showing after this. I just want to point out what had happened. So they didn't start the statement from the very beginning, to put into context what he was saying, right? Then they cut out a little section, right? And then got it to where he says, and this is their new hoax. Now, part of that little section was, just kind of the audience, going through and a little bit of a, kind of incoherent distraction. Fine. But they left out the part, before where they started, where he was putting into context what he was saying was the hoax. And then he goes on to say, here's, what the truth is, and starts outlining all what he had done. So what he was calling a hoax was the media's coverage of the coronavirus, or the media's coverage of how he was handling the coronavirus. That's what he was calling a hoax. And then he spends, forever outlining step by step all the things that his administration has been doing since January. Now, this was on February 28th. So he goes all the way back to what he was doing since January when news of the outbreak, broke to try and safeguard and protect the country. Right? And I'm going to show you all of that. Right? But I wanted to put into context that very deceptive editing. And you notice throughout that entire clip that they played, Trump didn't even mention coronavirus. He didn't, say the word. So, they're going through and they're deceptively editing in order to, take what he was saying about the media's narrative being a hoax versus, the coronavirus being a hoax. All right. And then he goes on to outline the steps. So here's the thing. I know in media, they try to go off and say, well, you want to keep your clips to under 30 seconds or, if you have to, no longer than a minute. Right. Now, for regular media, that may be the rule. And for those who try to imitate media, the professional people, that may be the rule. I say, this is my show. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play as much of a clip as I need to play so that you get full context of what was said and get the full information of what was said. Now, the clip I'm showing you does have some edits in it, and I've made those edits crystal clear. You'll see a big bright flash, it will turn white, and then it will continue on. And these edits, and you can go to Trump's YouTube channel and look for the South Carolina speech, on there. It's very easy to find, and you can watch this yourself, and, so you can double check my edits. And my edit is, just editing out the crowd chanting USA, USA, or him, getting sidetracked and going, hey, I see you at my rallies a lot. How many rallies is this for you now? So I kind of cut out those sidetracks. But even doing that, this clip that I'm about to play is 5 minutes long. All right, 5 minutes of him talking about the coronavirus being a serious threat and the steps his administration has taken. Now, did we kind of underestimate the threat, thinking that we had it contained earlier than we did? Yes. Okay. We all know, because at this particular point, there was only about 10 or 11 cases, and we had gotten on it early and all of that. And so we thought we had it contained. But, obviously it turns out that this virus is pretty hard to contain. So anyways, let's go ahead and actually see what Trump really said. And then you can see just how disgusting CNN is and how much they can't help themselves but to lie and push hoax news even during a crisis and pandemic.
Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that, right? Coronavirus. They're politicizing it. We did one of the great jobs. You say, how's President Trump doing? They go, oh, not good, not good. They have no clue. They don't have any clue. They can't even count their votes in Iowa. They can't even count. No, they can't. They can't count their votes. One of my people came up to me and said, Mr. President, they tried to beat you on Russia, Russia, Russia. That didn't work out too well. They couldn't do it. They tried the impeachment hoax. That was on a perfect conversation. They tried anything. They tried it over and over. They've been doing it since you got in. It's all turning. They lost. It's all turning. Think of it. Think of it. And this is their new hoax. But, we did something that's been pretty amazing. We're 15 people in this massive country. And because of the fact that we went early, we could have had a lot more than that. We're doing great. A number that nobody heard of, that I heard of recently, and I was shocked to hear it. 35,000 people on average die each year from the flu. Did anyone know that? 35,000. That's a lot of people. It could go to 100,000. It could be 27,000. They say usually a minimum of 27 goes up to 100,000 people a year die. And so far, we have lost nobody to coronavirus in the United States. Nobody. And it doesn't mean we won't. And we are totally prepared. It doesn't mean we won't. We are you take a look, magnificently organized with the best professionals in the world. We're prepared for the absolute worst. You have to be prepared for the worst, but hopefully it will all amount to very little. That's why I tell you, when we have the flu with 35,000 people, and this one is, we have to take it very, very seriously. That's what we're doing. We are preparing for the worst. My administration has taken the most aggressive action in modern history to prevent the spread of this illness in the United States. We are ready. We are ready. Totally ready. On January 31st, I ordered the suspension of foreign nationals who have recently been in China from entering the United States. An action which the Democrats loudly criticized and protested, and now everybody's complimenting me, saying, thank you very much, you were 100% correct. Could have been a whole different story. But I say, so let's get this right. A virus starts in China, bleeds its way into various countries all around the world, doesn't spread widely at all in the United States because of the early actions that myself and my administration took against a lot of other wishes. And the Democrats' single talking point, and you see it, is that it's Donald Trump's fault, right? I also created a White House virus task force. It's a big thing, a virus task force. I requested $2.5 billion to ensure we have the resources we need. The Democrats said, that's terrible. He's doing the wrong thing. He needs 8.5 billion, not 2.5. I've never had that before. I asked for 2.5. They want to give me 8.5. So I said, I'll take it. Does that make me a bit? I'll take it.
So there's what Trump actually said. Now, what I did is I made sure to take it from the exact same speech that Don Lemon was using on CNN to claim that Trump was calling it a hoax. And as you can see from yourself, that Trump was saying that the media's politicization of it and the narrative that they were saying, about how his administration was handling it, that was the hoax. And then he goes on to say that this is a threat. They're taking it seriously. They started, going off and banning travel of people who have been to China, especially in that area. And, he had assembled a task force, a virus task force, getting him prepared. He's, at the time, of that speech back in February, there wasn't, it wasn't widespread. We thought we had it contained. So obviously we did get a few things wrong still. As we go through and look back, we didn't have it as contained as we thought, as we underestimated how quickly this could spread because we, weren't necessarily prepared for asymptomatic, virus, in which case, people can be spreading it and infecting other people before they themselves develop any symptoms. So yes, it still got out, but he was pointing out there that, yes, this was serious. This was a threat. If he thought the coronavirus, let me put it to you this way. If he thought the coronavirus, as the media is trying to claim, was a hoax, then why was he banning travel? Why was he setting up a virus task force? Why was he already going through trying to implement, some quarantine? Why was it that he was already trying to put in place plans, to prepare for the worst? Those are not actions that you take if you think it's a hoax. So this is how, the media, goes through and, with their coverage to try and deceive, spin, and tell you not the story, but a story, as they can't help themselves but to politicize absolutely everything. Okay, so now we're going to move beyond the media. I'm just, I can point out just how sick and disgusting the media has acted and behaved this entire time until I'm blue in the face. But, while, it may help, get it out to you for those of you who are listening and maybe left leaning, maybe it might open your eyes, but chances are by this point, before I even got to that, realizing that I'm a conservative, you probably already tuned out, but just in case you did make it this far, I'm only pointing this stuff out, to try and open your eyes, to the deception of the media, and how they're trying to spin and rewrite history. But beyond that, there are a lot of other things that have happened, resulted because of the coronavirus that does go into and tie into debates that we've had for well over a decade, about, who was, and we're finding out who was right and who was wrong. So one of the debates that you may have fresh in your mind is over the Second Amendment, gun rights. Where the Democrats have kept attacking the Second Amendment, going, you don't need guns, you don't need more, you don't need a gun that shoots more than one bullet at a time, for hunting, right? You don't need, guns with, 10, 20, 30 round clips to go hunting. And we would point out that, the Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. It was about the rights of the citizens to be able to protect ourselves, to be able to quickly form a militia if we needed to, in case of invasion of a foreign power, or to be able to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. We've also pointed out that, guns, is for personal safety, especially in times where if a crisis broke out, we would want to be able to defend ourselves, because, we wouldn't be able to necessarily trust the government and the police. The Democrats would come out and attack this as crazy. You're conspiracy theorists. you're, crazy people, you're insane. You don't need, guns with personal protection, for all of these clips. If, a major crisis happened, that's what the police would be there for, and the military, they would be there to protect you. So because the police will be there, you don't need personal protection. So we just need to get rid of the Second Amendment, get rid of private gun ownership, because the police will protect you. Well, what did we find out? Not so much. So, due to the coronavirus crisis, Philadelphia police will no longer be making arrests for all narcotic offenses, theft from persons, retail theft, theft from auto burglary, vandalism, bench warrants, stolen autos, economic crisis such as passing bad checks, fraud, and prostitution. And what's worse is that they posted this along with a picture of their announcement on social media. So the police, that the left said would always be there to protect us, therefore we didn't need to exercise our Second Amendment rights, is now going out on social media saying, yeah, we're not actually going to be able to handle this. We can't protect you. And since they announced it on social media, they basically put out, a big, alarm, or blew the horn to all the criminals saying, hey, you know what? It's open season. It's open season. We're not going to be out there, to protect you or respond to this because we're diverting all of our attentions to coronavirus related stuff. So all other crimes is open season for criminals. Now, some of the left are going to try and still argue for banning the Second Amendment and private gun ownership, saying, yeah, but see, if we didn't have guns to begin with, the criminals wouldn't have the guns to commit these crimes, so we would still be safer. Well, no, we wouldn't. Why? Well, we banned drugs, but drugs still flow across the border, across the southern border, because we don't secure it. And it's no surprise that we don't have enough border agents to patrol the border, right? Which is why we've been talking about the border wall. So let's say we followed the left's model, if we're trying to get rid of the Second Amendment. What would have happened? Guns would have still flowed to criminals because we didn't have a secure southern border. So they just would have came up from Mexico. I mean, how do you think criminals get their hands on guns to begin with? They can't buy them legally from any gun store. They can't buy them at any trade stores. They only have two options. Try to break into homes and steal it, which they don't know which homes do and do not have guns. Or two, they buy their guns off of the black market from guns being transported up from Mexico to our through our southern border and throughout the United States and sold on the black market. So if we had followed the left's model, what would we be facing? Criminals have guns, the citizenry would be disarmed, and the police just announced on on social media, it's open season for criminals because the police are just not going to be there to protect us. So once again, to all you leftists, conservatives are proven right. We get proven right time and time again. And, this outbreak, I guess maybe one of the blessings of this outbreak, if there is any, is to go through and highlight this, throughout society and putting an end to the theoretical debates by seeing what the real world implications are. All right. So now let's go on and talk about another issues. So the the media has been attacking the idea of homeschooling for a very long time. All of those who have been engaged in homeschooling, good job. You're out there sitting back going, ha, ha, ha. All you people are demonizing me. And now what's happening? Everyone's promoting homeschooling. So yes, we go through here from the American Thinker. Throughout the years, American homeschooling and online K-12 education has become far more popular and realistic than brick and mortar public schools want to admit. School choice is disrupting and angering public school district and officials, and school boards are voting against student vouchers so they can continue to enslave their students to their school district instead of allowing state allocated money to travel with that student to a school of their choice. This includes online education. School districts also keep knowledge of online schools and online education far away from K through 12 students and their parents at all costs. After all, bodies in the seats mean more money for brick and mortar school districts. So the left, because of the teachers union and all that, have been attacking, demonizing, and trying to block, prevent, and limit homeschooling options and, the freedom of choice. Well, what happened? The coronavirus came out. And now what's going on is everyone's saying, well, you know what? We have to do this homeschooling thing. Now, the infrastructure's there. Why? Because the right, being sickened by how the school has, largely become indoctrination camps rather than education systems, have been, pushing and promoting homeschooling for a long time. And because of that, the infrastructure for homeschooling has been built, and has, evolved with technology so that, we were able to now, as the schools are shut down and people are wondering what they are going to do about their children's education, you can thank all those people that have been promoting homeschooling and school choice and all that for having the infrastructure for your kids to be able to continue their education during this time of pandemic and, panic. So again, here is an issue where the right was saying, hey, we need to make sure we have school choice, we have options, and we need to make sure that online homeschooling, is an option. And now it may be the one thing that saves, this particular school year, or depending on how long this pandemic, lasts, because no one actually knows how long it's going to last. This may be what saves our kids' education so they don't miss out on a year, or they don't miss out on a year and a half of education. So congratulations, conservatives. We were right yet again on issues that we were promoting, or at least fighting for the right to be able to continue. Now, I know some people that are, even before this pandemic, homeschooling their kids. And they're out there, just kind of going, this doesn't interrupt my kids' education. My kids are still getting quality education while everybody else, is just kind of suffering, the consequences of now having to rely on the very type of things that they had attacked. Okay, so other things that are going on, this issue comes from The Hill. It's a video. I broke this up into two parts because I wanted to break down two parts of this because they are showing that they do not understand in any way, shape, or form basic economics. Either that or they are purposely ignoring and misinforming and gaslighting their audience in order to push a narrative. Now, this isn't about the coronavirus and attacking Trump. This is about a social policy issue, but they are using the situation to try and misinform, mislead, the public in order to push this policy. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Every time the left pushes for an idea that would help the working class, the refrain inevitably comes back. How will you pay for it? Oh, the deficit. Oh, the debt. Think of the future generations. Republicans love to fearmonger about the always coming but never arriving debt and deficit crisis, when Democrats are in power to keep them from accomplishing anything. Democrats foolishly play right along, buying into all the dumb bromides about how the government needs to balance their checkbook just like a household. Now, I don't know about you, but my household doesn't include the capability of printing money to purchase my own debt, something that our government has been doing this week to help the market.
Okay, so there's a lot of economic stupidity in that statement there, where she's going, how are we going to pay for it? About the oncoming debt crisis that is always around the corner but never gets here. And, the government just has the ability to print more money. All right. How do you think inflation happens? Why do you think the cost of living goes up? It's because the government keeps printing money, even though they're using money to buy our own debt. That's how inflation happens, right? So let's take a look here at a moment. Let me just grab this. Let's say this is $1, right? I know it's just an envelope. I had to grab something, but let's just say this is $1, all right? Now this dollar represents a value. Now, since we abandoned the gold system, the value of $1, right, is based off of the value of the economy, right? So let's say, you got $1, there's a chair, right? The chair costs $1, right? So you hand them the dollar, you get a chair. You exchange something of value for something of value, right? Because the dollar represents the value of the chair, right? Now, let's say the government comes in, right? And now they print off a second dollar, and I'll just call this pen a second dollar. I mean, just trying to do some visual aids here, all right? So now the government comes in and prints off a second dollar, right? I know, low budget visual aids, right? So they print off the second dollar. Well, what happens, right? Well, you doubled the money in circulation, but you still only have the one chair, right? And so, because of that, the value of each and spending power of each dollar goes down. And so the person who has the chair goes, well, before there was only $1, and you could only afford $1. Therefore, the chair was $1, but now you got $2. So now the chair is $2. And that's how inflation happens, right? That's why prices go up. Why the price of milk has gone up, why the price of basic living goes up. It's because the government keeps spending money. That we keep, having rising prices and rising cost of living. That's how inflation happens. That's why we have inflation. And why $1 doesn't go as far now as it did, say, back in the 1950s. Because the government keeps coming up with this idea that we can just print more money. And they try to shelter or slow down the effects of them doing so by using some of the money that they print to buy up debt, right? And that may slow down the pain so that we don't notice it all at once. But that's what happens. This is why we always ask, how are you going to pay for it? Because if all you're doing is just printing out more money, you're devaluing the dollar and you're decreasing the spending power. So let's say, we go through and raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and the government keeps spending money. Well, if you raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour and the government keeps printing out more money, like what she is suggesting, because the government has the power to print out more money to just pay for the debt, unlike a household. If you do that, that $15 an hour would eventually have less spending power, right? If they keep printing money, than what making $7.50 an hour does today. Now that may be a little bit down the road, right? And they might do things to try and slow down how fast that happens, but that will eventually and inevitably happen because of all this constant printing of money. How do you think Venezuela got into the problem that they are in? Because they thought that the government could just print out more money. Right? So you can go back and take a look at Venezuela. And you can take a look at the economic collapse. What happened? The government kept printing out more money, kept printing out more money, kept printing out more money. It got to the point where people were, where the economic collapse wasn't because of the lack of circulation of money. It's because the money became worthless, right? Because they printed out so much. People were actually going through with wheelbarrows full of cash, right? Entire wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a cup of coffee, because that's how much inflation, had occurred because of all of the printing of money. And then eventually they printed out so much money and it became so worthless, people just threw it out. They just threw it away because it had absolutely no value left, right? But the left doesn't seem to understand that concept, doesn't understand that, that when you just print out more money, it's going to devalue the spending power. The only way you can print out more money without it devaluing the spending power per dollar printed is to increase the value of the economy, right? So that the economy picks up and produces more goods. So let me go through. I give you the example of $1 for a chair. You get $2. Now the cost of the chair goes up to $2. Well, let me give you what the opposite would be. Let's say you got $1, right? And, there's one chair, right? So you got $1, you pay the $1, you get the chair, right? But now let's say you got $1 and there's 2 chairs. Well, now you're going, well, I don't necessarily want to spend my entire dollar on that chair. Oh, and the chair's only 50 cents now? All right there. Okay, I'll give you 50 cents. Or, hey, I'll give you $1 and now I get 2 chairs, right? It's when you increase the value of the economy through the products and services provided and offered. When you increase that value, do you increase the value of the dollar or at least maintain the value of the dollar if you print out more money? But if you just keep printing out more money without an increase in economic activity or output, or your printing of money outpaces, which is what the government has been doing for decades now, where their printing of money outpaces the increase in economic value of the economy. That's why the value of the dollar keeps decreasing and prices keep going up, and why they now say that this just means we just need to increase the minimum wage. So they don't understand basic economics. I mean, what I just explained is Econ 101, all right? Now let's go through and take a look at another clip, as they go through this segment and debunk, yet another false talking point. But at least this false talking point is on a social issue.
Now there's a crisis that not only brings utter misery to the working class, but, and this is the critical part, has hit the stock portfolio, profit margins, and leisure lifestyle of the affluent. It's also so utterly devastating to the working class that there is some realization that, as I said yesterday, they realize without action, their next brunch out may be served with a side of pitchforks. So now suddenly money's no object. Coronavirus healthcare? Sure. Industry bailouts? Oh, hell yes. Direct cash payments? Let's do it. The Trump administration is proposing a stimulus package that will quickly dwarf what was offered by the Obama administration back in 2008 over howls of protest about the socialism and the debt, et cetera, et cetera. And as I've been calling for here, aside from the industry bailouts, I am all for it. They're currently calibrating what's the minimum cash payment that would keep the pitchforks at bay, but not get people thinking they actually deserve economic rights.
Okay, so there was a whole lot of crap that she pushed in there. Now, of course, we got to make sure we keep businesses afloat here. I mean, it's not that the businesses, are going to be suffering or going under because of decisions they made, but rather because of things that the government is forcing, such as forcing them to shut down. Right? Shut down their operations, close up for a while, all non-essential businesses. And if we don't do anything, as far as, whether you want to call it a bailout or, assistance or whatever, then after the pandemic, those businesses are going to be under, and then we'll have an unemployment crisis because now all these jobs have been lost because the businesses went under during the times in which the government forced them to shut down and not be able to do business. So they're still incurring expenses, but now they have no revenue coming in because they were ordered to close up, right? So we do need to make sure that we don't end up, into a 2008, scenario of a massive economic, crisis of mass job loss and layoffs afterwards. So the business part, yes. Now, when they go off and say, no one's still asking how we pay for it. Yes, we are still asking, how are we going to pay for this? With what Trump is proposing, whether they send out money like $1,000 to everybody or, the near $1 trillion, stimulus package to try and stay off the economic effects and all of that. We are still asking, how are you going to pay for it? the difference between this and why we've been asking, that question before isn't some, hypocritical, attack to just stop, or, to not do something. It's not, we're not asking that, before because we just wanted to prevent it, but now we're saying, oh yeah, we have all the money. No, we know we don't have all the money, and we're still trying to figure out how we're going to pay for this. We know that the, consequences of the bailout, that's coming, the economic stimulus, the sending everybody some money and temporary relief is going to have some long-term consequences, and we're going to be paying for that and suffering for that decision for time to, for quite a long time, right? So we're still asking how you're going to pay for it, and we still don't like having to do this, right? And we're still doing this knowing that it's going to cause problems, more long term. So right now, though, the question isn't necessarily about how we're going to pay for it. We know that's the question. I mean, we do know that that is something we need to consider. We need to look at, and people are, asking, but that's not the most important question there. The most important question is, what are our other options? Right? And as we look around here, we realize we're in a situation where there are no good options, right? So we're trying to go around and, and instead of saying, well, this is a great option, so we're going to go do this. No, we don't have a great option scenario here. What we have is a list of bad options, and we're trying to figure out which of those is the least bad option. So choosing between the least bad option, right, is not the same as saying, yes, we're now gung-ho, we think this is a great idea. We know this is a bad idea, but it's the least worst of the bad ideas. It's the least worst of the available options. It's kind of like medical triage, right? You think doctors, go around and say, hey, you know what? We, want to take care of all patients. And, you say, well, you should let some die. He goes, no, that would be unethical. And then now over in Italy going that because doctors are saying, we can't treat everybody. So if you meet these certain conditions, we're going to let you die. That doesn't mean that the doctors now are saying, hey, you know what? Our excuse of wanting to treat everybody before, that was bogus. We really, wanted people to die. And so now that we're in a crisis, we're going to let people die. Now, maybe that analogy isn't perfectly aligned, but what I'm saying here is, as doctors would love to be able to treat everybody, and there are times and situations in which they can't, so they have to make, hard decisions about the least worst option to try and, treat and help the most people possible. When it comes to the economic stimulus, it's not that we suddenly have all the money, to be able to do this, without consequence. It's not that we suddenly, realize that all the times before when we asked, how are we going to pay for it, that we, that was just all a bunch of crap. No. It's still relevant. It still applies. It's just, what's the options? Right? If you have a better option here of how we can protect the people, the economy, and the businesses financially without doing this bailout, without going through and doing this, I would love to hear it. If there is a way to avoid this bailout, and would not cause more suffering, than what, we would see with the bailout, I would love to see that. Right? I would love to see how that would do that. I mean, if you can come up with that plan, I'd be gung-ho for it. How we can help people without, creating long-term damage to our country that will take us years to recover from. I just don't know what that option is, right? And I wish I did. I really wish I knew of a better option, right? But what's the alternative? The alternative is we do nothing And then afterwards, we have all these businesses that went under during this pandemic because, they still had all these expenses without any income coming in. And now you look at massive unemployment, rates that may even exceed what we saw during the 2008 crash. I saw some people going out there floating that unemployment could reach up to 20%. That would be massive. I mean, we would start hitting Great Depression levels, and then trying to figure out, well, what's the long-term harm and impact of that? And is there a way we can ease the consequences of doing a bailout so that we don't feel it all at once? Right? So again, it's not about, that statement was just an excuse before to do nothing. We got plenty of money to do that. The real question is, what's the alternative? Right? But the left, they don't want to go off and think about the alternative because they're trying to deliver a narrative that, in claiming that the pandemic proves them right, when the pandemic doesn't prove them right at all, they're just blowing a bunch of smoke out their tailpipes. All right, how am I doing at time? Okay, so I'm just a little bit over an hour right now. So, man, I'm still not going to get to the New York Times 1619 project. It is, wow, really? Okay, I promise I'll get to the New York Times 1619 project. I've been trying to get to it for like the last 3-4 days and keep the show around an hour long, right? But I'm going over today, of course. All right, so anyways, there is one thing that is going on here that is slipping under the radar because of the media's, constant nonstop, coronavirus coverage. And maybe part of that whole nonstop coronavirus coverage, even though they don't really have much information at this point, or new information to give at this point, and and most of what they are saying is full of crap anyways, is to distract us from what was going on with the prosecutions that resulted from the Mueller probe. So as you remember, there was this whole Russia deal where they appointed a special counsel, and the special counsel claimed to have found a bunch of evidence linking people to, Russia's disinformation campaign, and Russia, trying to interfere in the election, and, a lot of the prosecutions that came about as far as people associated with Trump had nothing to do with Russia. It was about taxi medallion schemes and tax evasions and all of that. But one of the things that they tried to do is say, well, we got this company. Yes, we found this company operating this troll farm, or whatever. And, we found a lot of evidence, a big, massive operation, and therefore we filed, to go ahead and, prosecute them. And, Mueller, was right. We were right about the whole Russia thing. Look, we found these people, and now and they're getting prosecuted for the crimes. One thing that has been consistent is the prosecutions that came out of Mueller's probe, are just as much crap as his report, right? And his report was just full of crap. I mean, there's been so much of that has been debunked. But I want to get to this particular one because this is hilarious, right? So, with Concord Management, with Concord Management, a motion to dismiss Concord defendants, right? This is actually, the court filing, and you'd be able to, look this up yourself. So from the filing, highlighted sections, the indictment alleges that the defendants engaged in what they dubbed information warfare against the United States of America, a systematic effort to sow political discord and influence the outcome of the 2016 U.S. presidential election. They charge the defendants with conspiring to defraud the federal agencies. And charge the defendants with conspiring to defraud the federal agencies responsible for preventing and counteracting improper foreign influence on U.S. elections. So that's what they were charged with, right? So, I mean, let's not forget that, that's what the media had gone off to try and say, yep, see, we got, all this evidence. We got, this company. We got, Mueller did a great job here. Well, as you can see, this is a motion to dismiss. So here's the thing about why you don't necessarily prosecute things from a counterintelligence case, right? And I'll show you this, and then it gets even more hilarious after this. Right? So in any event, during the motion to dismiss, Concord, having the right to defend themselves, asked, to see the evidence against them because, the prosecution didn't want to actually present the evidence that they had, which would be a whole violation of our entire, judicial system, right? Well, in their defense, they go, well, the government has therefore decided, when deciding, on this motion to dismiss, has therefore decided that the calculation of whether a substantial federal interest is served by this prosecution has changed since the indictment was returned, and the better course is to cease litigation as to Concord defendants. Okay, so they were asked to present their evidence, and they go, oh, crap, doing so, they tried to say, well, doing so will present a national security risk, because it would reveal sources and methods and how we obtain counterintelligence, which they probably should have thought about before they brought this prosecution. And this is why you don't prosecute counterintelligence cases. Oh, it gets worse. It gets better because it turns out they don't actually have the evidence, right? It gets better because they tried to defend on this. We don't have, the national security risk doesn't weigh the benefits of prosecutions. But there were things that were happening when the defendants were asking to be able to see the evidence that the prosecution had in order to, prepare for the case and prepare for the trial, the defendant's right to defend themselves in open court. Well, this gets interesting because the government tried to bluff. They tried to say, well, the national security interest of we can't show this evidence, but we got a lot of evidence here. We got, over a terabyte. What was it? We had a very brief call on Friday initiated by the government, and they told me they were going to give us 2 terabytes worth of what they said was social media influence taken, from. So basically what they said is they gathered about 2 terabytes worth of information, regarding, the disinformation and, their alleged charges against this group, and tried to go, well, we can't provide this because of the national security interest, but we have 2 terabytes worth of information. Hold on. Here's where it gets great. Here's how it gets better. In here in this highlights section, when they go, oh, really? You have 2 terabytes worth of information? So they decide to prompt a question here, in which they asked, what language is it in, right? The defendants asked the prosecution, what language is all the evidence in? And the prosecution responds, primarily Russian. So the defendants ask, have you translated it? The prosecution says no. So the defendants ask, well, how do you know what's in it? And then they didn't want to talk anymore. I mean, you understand this. So what they did is they tried to bluff a prosecution, to bolster the idea that Mueller's probe actually produced something of substance and uncovered, some sort of conspiracy, right? And so they tried to bluff. And so they went into court, having nothing. The defendants went off and said, I would like to see the evidence against me so I can prepare for the trial. And they go, no. We can't provide you, the evidence because of national security interests, right? And go, well, we can't continue the process. We can't have a defense without being able to examine the evidence against us, right? And then they tried to bluff by saying, well, we have 2 terabytes worth of evidence against you. 2 terabytes. It's like going into, or you see in the TV shows where they bluff, or maybe they put down, a videotape in the old show of you, or maybe some sort of chip in a screen, and they don't tell you that they don't actually say what's on the tape or whatever, but they just put it down, put it aside, make you think that they had the evidence, in hopes that you would just go ahead and take a plea deal and confess to the crime, right? But they kept pressing, we need to be able to examine the evidence against us for our defense, as required by law. And so they tried to bluff by saying we had these 2 terabytes, but then when questioned and examined about that 2 terabytes worth of information, it turns out that the information is in Russian and they haven't bothered to translate it. Therefore, they don't even know what their evidence says. They never even examined the evidence. For all they know, they collected a bunch of, documents and social posts sharing Betty Crocker recipes, right? But this is what they went into court with, and this is what the media had bolstered for so long as proof of a Russian, conspiracy with the Trump campaign and affected the outcome of the 2016 election and all of that. And it turns out they went into court with absolutely nothing and tried to bluff their way. So in order to try and save face, they just decided in the motion to dismiss to say that, well, while we know you're guilty, the national security interests, wouldn't, is more important than the prosecution. So I guess we'll just let you go. And this is going on under the radar, because everyone's focused on coronavirus, right? But this goes back to show that the whole Russia investigation was a hoax. They knew it was a hoax. They knew they had nothing, but they persisted, all the way through the 2018 midterms, because it wasn't that there was actually anything to the Trump-Russia collusion. It was all about the swamp trying to bring down the president and try and help the Democrats retake some political power. That's all it was. All right. So anyways, I really wanted to, I think tomorrow I'll just start off with the New York Times 1619 project, because it is horrible and disgraceful, and the fact that they tried to push this, on the left through the school system, which is probably why they really hated the idea of homeschooling, and why the, this might be, what's going on with coronavirus could be great for the homeschooling system here. But, I promise I will get around to this, right? It's just there's been way too much going on and trying to get out all of this. So I'd like to thank you so much for listening. I really, I'm humbled by the download numbers on the podcast version of the show. And on the podcast version, you can go back to yesterday's episode to follow a link to the YouTube channel if you want to see the graphics and, watch the videos rather than listening. If you're one of the people who are able to stay home all day because of the quarantine and everything, and so you can watch this and, go ahead and do that, or keep listening to the audio. In fact, no, never mind. Don't go to the YouTube channel. Stay on the audio podcast, because the advertisers, I want to keep that ad revenue going, especially with all the things going on in the economy. So keep the ad revenues going. Stay on the audio version of the show. All right. Don't come over to the video. Stay on the audio and keep downloading and jacking up those ad revenues. All right. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and I will be back again soon.